Storytime Radio Evolution. Fans of stories and storytelling, welcome back to Gianluca Roppolo in the Storytime living room. Today we will have the pleasure of being able to chat with a lawyer who joined us here in our studios. Before introducing him, however, I invite you as always to follow us on all our social channels. In the
Detail find Storytime on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, but also on
and on LinkedIn. So if you would like to follow us a little bit everywhere so that you can stay connected with all our content. Having said that, I'm going to go right away and welcome today's guest. I'm talking about attorney Fabio Santoro. Hi Fabio, welcome back. Hi Gianluca, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to have you here in our studios. So Fabio, let's not waste any more time. Let's start with a brief introduction of you. Who are you? Then I am an international lawyer, generally experienced in business internationalization, that is opening foreign companies, tax saving and asset protection. Great, then I would ask you right away, what are the most common mistakes when you want to open a foreign company? The most common mistake is doing it without taking any information and relying on a superficial search that is done on Google, which is done by so many, and being attracted solely by the low price. In several jurisdictions you can find truly bargain-priced open companies. This is unfortunately a malpractice that leads people, especially the more naive ones. Businesses made by very young people who are just now entering the market
to consider price as the only exculpatory factor between one solution and another. Unfortunately, there is much more because
what people don't know, or rather what they only realize at an advanced stage when they have already spent the money by then, is that many of those roughly superficially made companies are actually non-functioning companies, are companies that cannot take business to international levels, cannot help you get a real bank account, which is absolutely essential to be able to proceed with any business.
They delay
always to more rip-rise the entry into operation of the business, so as such.
The second most classic mistake, let's say the Madonna mistake. The second mistake is that of not considering the foreign component of the foreign company, which the
regulations provide for this across the board in Europe.
And also in Italy, distinction, indeed Italy perhaps among the strictest jurisdictions in this regard.
The one that the foreign company must have an actual foreign structure.
Many people think that opening a virtual office may be at some post office box,
who knows where,
may be something instrumental to their desire to achieve commercial success.
Business success.
Unfortunately, then when you come up against the bureaucracy with the banks, with the authorities, all this comes to light, and also comes
lacking what then the fundamental principle of business, that is peace of mind, of course.
To be able to proceed. Without this, it is absolutely useless to deal with a structure such as that of a foreign company, not to mention the fact that many people are not clear what the real reasons for going abroad should be, because many are attracted solely and exclusively by tax savings, which is an essential component.
But it is not the only.
Must be considered along with many other factors, such as, for example, one's market, such as how to expand, the possibilities for expansion, and the approach to customers. These are all things that must be duly taken into account when approaching a foreign company. These are, let's say, just a very brief part, otherwise we would run out of it. But there are very many others that in my small way I always try to explain to those who have the patience and desire to listen to me. They are only a small percentage. However, they are the ones that I perhaps consider the most serious, but which often then in the real world are joined by multiple others.
Exactly so. Without mincing words, rely immediately on a professional. Here then, Fabio, you also deal with domestic and international tax saving. So what are the most abused tax-saving techniques?
So certainly one technique that is particularly abused for tax savings is a technique considered by many to be legal, and I would like to say that it is not. Okay, let's clarify once and for all. A crime is using a foreign company to self-bill. This is something passed on by many as legendary advice. It is actually something Not only inefficient, that is also detected immediately by all authorities, first and foremost the Internal Revenue Service, but above all it is an illegal thing. Because two crimes are committed at the same time, mainly among other things. One is esterovestification. So the term in itself is a term that does not exist in law, that is referred to as misrepresentation at the time of the annual declaration by companies. Esterovestification is the second false billing. These are crimes punishable in some cases with a simple fine. Then if you go beyond a certain margin, there is even jail time. In the other case, the amount of imprisonment is also stipulated in the criminal code. So these are not such things to joke about. This time legal, which is however
other technique, yes.
Greatly abused without the proper correctives is the institution of holding company, and for heaven's sake, it is an absolutely valid technique. But of course it must be surrounded by a corporate structure and professionals to deal with it, because opening the holding company as an end in itself may not be decisive in terms of tax savings. Why? Because of course many people tend to confuse a company set up with the instrumental purpose of being a holding company from what is a company that then in practice behaves as a holding company and therefore as such tends to operate commercially in an extremely dissimilar way. That's why then you always need the professional to follow you, and you always need someone who can keep their eyes on all these things. Why? Because this tool, as good as it is, if it is adopted badly, could be totally ineffective and lead you to pay exactly the same amount of fees that you would normally have paid, only with the added costs of running a holding company that are additional.
Exactly, that they are useful.
A third technique that is used, in my opinion, often and frequently improperly, is that of creating a representative office. The representative office, which is nothing more than an offshoot of a foreign company in Italy, is often used in the appropriate way, because it too, as well as the holding company, is a very valid tool. But few remember the fact that the representative office, in order to have the beneficial effects on the company that it purports to have, must be a passive representative office and not an active
So as
one.
such, there is no need for any formal activity to be exploited that is not mere benefit of the foreign company then.
Benefit of the foreign company. So many tend
The office
to misunderstand this concept and try to use
of representation as if it were a real active legal instrument.
And this then is the key that often and frequently leads companies to take fines not paid me.
Amount in of very high taxes. Very clear. I would like to ask you a very quick thing. From what amount of assets do you think it is advisable to proceed with asset protection activities? So this is not an easy question, because if we're talking about cash, personally, I wouldn't do it for less than 100,000 euros, because in any case, asset protection activities are still relatively expensive and they need somebody to put them in place. So paying the expenses for all that must be worth it anyway. If we're talking about assets, so liquid, if we are talking about illiquid assets, in this case we are talking about property, registered real estate, and whatever else type can be. A property, a boat, an airplane, whatever you want. In that case, the discipline changes, because even a single property can, as long as it is real estate that is not needed and is not used for certain activities that then put it under certain types of attention, can proceed even with the presence of a single asset. However, making a calculation of the value is not so easy, because the value then can also depend on the use you make of that particular asset and how important that asset is for the purposes of one's business, or at any rate one's activity. And so the right answer is it depends. It depends. That is also why then there is a need for a professional anyway, regardless of the professional. Anyone who wishes to protect his or her assets still needs to make a careful, all-encompassing assessment.
Certainly.
Of the asset to be protected, both in relation to one's business and in relation to one's personal private life. One last minute, how safe are offshore companies? Then the answer, in short, if they are safe in whether, yes, if you know how to do for offshore companies, the same principle that I listed earlier applies when you talk about foreign companies. You would be to say many are barked down by low costs and by unprofessionalism, but because so much is not needed, because at the end of the day I stay abroad, so whoever comes to get me vata the plague, unfortunately it is not so there. There are certainly safer jurisdictions than others that have greater economic political stability. I want to give a practical example. In a world where everybody brings on Dubai, which by the way just this year is no longer a pure offshore, because now the new decree has come into effect that companies have to pay taxes and then under certain circumstances, under certain conditions. However, it applies to almost everybody. I would maybe suggest a very humble Gibraltar, which maybe has the same connotations as a Dubai in terms of at least until recently. Same connotations in terms of no taxes to pay in terms of pure corporation tax, but enjoys significantly greater economic, financial, political and media stability than many other. Corporations such as might be corporations in Delaware, corporations in New Mexico and whatnot. Well, in addition to all the references that you have been able to read here in overlay, I'll also add the LinkedIn. I'll read it to you as written. Safecons Limited. Right. Then you can precisely search for this business a little bit everywhere. Right, here's the money lawyer's point. Come the site, a brief description of what we're talking about, what it is a site in which there is a compendium of all our activities and numerous and, let's say, voluminous content about tax savings, foreign companies. The best methods to approach this step are all content for free, so they can be used without any commitment then, of course, for those who wish to. Deep in the matter, there are still our contacts within the site for everything can be safely. There is also a toll-free number to call. But for anyone who still wants to acculturate a little more about this matter, I invite him to look at our site www.themoneylawyers.com.
Exactly.
And as mentioned previously, also follow them on the various social channels. Fabio, it has been a pleasure to have had you here in our studios. A greeting and good luck in the continuation of your professional career.
Thank you very much. Storytime Evolution Radio.